94.3 WYBC, the rhythm of the city. Good morning, New Haven. This is Moving Target. I am your host, Jay Kemp, and it's been like 2 weeks. I missed you, New Haven. I missed being on this mic, bringing some truth to power. And my co-host, Remedy Sharif, is not in the building, but of course we got Spencer, the young one, coming through, subbing or filling in for him. What's going on, bro? How you doing, man?
Doing good.
All right, we got a lot to talk about with this school admissions, man. I definitely want to touch on that. All right. So I want to first be able to address something real quick. Actually, before we get into the school admissions, I want to take this time to thank everyone that tunes in every Saturday morning, and everyone who likes the Facebook page and shares the videos. You are appreciated. And we're asking for you to keep that support going by subscribing to our YouTube page, Moving Target Media. All right. And also follow us on Instagram, Moving Target Media. All right. So before we get into today's discussion, I want to talk about rich people getting arrested. That's pretty much what the yeah, don't worry about it. As long as you speak in the mic, it's fine, brother. Yeah, I want to talk about rich people getting arrested because that's pretty much what this is. Because I really can't say that I'm affected by it, So I want to welcome our guest, brother Kevin Muhammad. What's up, brother?
All right, good to be here.
Just speaking to the mic, make sure you do.
Good to be here.
Good to see you again, man. You always come on the show.
All right.
All right, and you have Muck Mud, which is you're an educator. Absolutely. You are an advocate to owning our own education and doing it the way we need to do it for us. Right. So I wanted you to come on and just talk about this really quick before we get in our discussion about what is going on with the school admissions scandal.
Well, you have to understand how Yale University and Ivy Leagues began. The first students of these schools were there not because they were necessarily more brilliant than anyone. They were there because they were the rich owners of plantations, the plantation owners' children. And so you look at Yale University, funded by Reverend Berkeley, who owned acres of land, and it was used to be rented to slave owners, and that's Yale's first scholarship.
Right.
And so it always was those who could pay their way in the school. Traditionally, they're just following how the Ivy League started.
So it's just how it goes.
It's how it goes.
And this isn't even rich people, or these are the rich people, but there's people even more wealthier than these people that got caught.
And traditionally, it's been, you have a Bush senior and you have a Bush junior.
Right.
The last few presidents have come from wealthy families, I think with the exception of President Obama, who's also an Ivy League graduate. So that represents the white power structure. And I think what we have to realize is they have used their pool of money to fund their schools to keep them in power. And now's the time that we should look at, wow, it's actually failing a little bit. Let us redirect our funds to universities that represent us, because I think that what we don't realize is that those universities really represent oppression. So I tell young people, it's not the school, it's you.
So this brings me to my other point that I wanted to address on this, and that is when it comes to how we think, right? If we're focused on entrepreneurialism, if we're focused on black community, empowering the black community,
right,
how important is it for us to get our kids in Ivy League schools?
I don't think it's that important. I think what happens is it was good when America's Fortune 500 was working, but every year at least 20 to 30 top Fortune 500 companies come down. And it's up to the creativity and brilliance. Look at the companies that are doing well now.
Right.
They're out of the box thinkers.
Yeah.
They're not Ivy League thinkers. And so when we look at the future of this economy, we will be looking at people who are not going to your Ivy League schools, but have demonstrated their entrepreneurial skills, out-of-box thinking, non-traditional approaches.
Yeah.
Even school is going to become online, non-traditional, and that kind of education is going to actually be eradicated.
Yeah.
So I think it's not important. What I think is important is for us to teach our children what we're going to do beyond working for someone else.
Right.
What's in your heart? What are you really here to do on this planet first, and then let your education facilitate that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that daddy's rich, the old school model, and I'm going to send you as a Harvard Yale fellow, you're going to put on a jacket, and you're going to walk into corporate America. That's gone.
Yeah.
And I think this is after that tradition. And this has been going on for years.
Yeah. No,
but it just seems like at this time, there's some folks in high power that are fighting with each other, looking at corruption, and that's either in the White House or it is in the Yale House, but it's happening.
Yeah.
But it's a good time for us to start to demonstrate our collective power, responsibility, and stop redirecting. I think the HBCUs, this is a good time for for them to come out and speak.
Thank you so much, brother, for coming through. We definitely have to tackle this on a larger scale.
Absolutely.
You know, and we will. But I think your insight was great today. Thank you, brother.
Let me go educate some kids now.
Yeah, man, go do that.
All right, thank you, my brother.
All right, thank you, brother. Thanks. So yes, we have a great discussion that's for you. We have a really great topic, you know, that I definitely want to just. I feel like it's time to address it, you know, because I see a lot of things happening in the industry and in Hollywood and entertainment. And just my opinion, I'm gonna put this disclaimer out there. This is just my opinion, all right? But hip hop culture should be in school history books right after the chapter about civil rights. Since the roots of hip hop came from every part of our history leading up to its birth in the Bronx in the early 70s, it's safe to say that the voice of hip hop became the echoes of those who fought through the civil rights era and cried when leader after leader, movement after movement was infiltrated and eventually assassinated, of course, by the FBI created task force COINTELPRO, who was in charge of taking down black militants and every black movement. And that voice of that civil rights era was the soundtrack, right? Harry Belafonte, James Brown, Mary Lou Hamer, Sam Cooke, Curtis Mayfield, Nina Simone. I mean, but I always say hip hop doesn't die, the soundtrack changes. And the soundtrack changed to Grandmaster Flash with The Message and NWA with F the Police or Public Enemy with Fight the Power, saying the same thing, but in a different way. And that last voice of the young generation became hip hop, and eventually that was infiltrated and in many ways silenced. But I think that's changing. I personally feel hip hop is becoming more influential than Martin and Malcolm. Yes, I said it. Almost anybody from the civil rights era. 21 Savage, Offset, Meek Mills, Nipsey Hussle, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, all huge rappers that shifted their music and their message on and off the stage. And this is only the beginning. Jay-Z putting out documentaries about bringing awareness to criminal justice reform. Nipsey Hussle doing a documentary on Dr. Sebi and holistic practitioner. Diddy making his own school. I mean, it really looks like we are truly understanding the power we have in hip hop. And I believe the FBI, aka COINTELPRO, knows it and is watching these rappers real close. All right? I believe there are corporations who own parts of the industry of hip hop that see it and are threatened by it. So are we beginning to become the civil rights era of our time? You know, are we going that way, or are we long from it? Are we far from it, from reaching that level where we can actually speak as those in the civil rights era, right? So joining me is my guest, daughter of hip hop legend and New Haven's very own TC Islam. What's going on, Imani Kairee?
What's going on?
How you
so
feeling?
Happy to be here. I'm excited to be here.
I'm
Shout out
excited
to
for
all
you
my
to be
hip
here.
steppers.
Yeah, so it's hip steppers, right?
Yes. it's the
Salute
hip
to all the
steppers.
hip steppers. And I want to just start with this question, you know, because
Sure.
your father is a legend
Yes.
right here from New Haven.
Yes.
A lot of people, some know, some don't know, especially the young ones. They don't know how much of a legend he was. What do you think? Do you think hip hop is, you know, it was declared a religion, a culture, its own culture? Do you think that we are headed towards a time where we're that influential, like the civil rights movement?
I definitely do. Even just thinking about hip hop in general, it was made by us and for us. It was supposed to be freedom of speech. So when you think about, like, I had some of those civil rights, the rights of citizens to political and social freedom and equality, and that was our freedom of speech. You know, that was our self-expression. So I do think we are headed that way. But just thinking about it on a general scale in America, just as far as black folks, when were we ever free? When you really dive deep into it, you know what I mean? We're very influential people. You look at car commercials, you look at any commercial really, and there's a hip hop beat up there or someone's trying to rap on it. We're very influential. We do have a lot of power, so I do think it's headed that way.
Do you think it should be in the school books? Because I always say that hip hop needs to be studied and needs to be taught the same way we teach about Malcolm and about Martin and about Stokely and all. Like, I don't
I
believe it
do.
ended.
I do. But not just hip hop, jazz, rock and roll.
Mm.
Black people, we were very influential in those genres as well.
I mean,
And
they.
a
I
lot of
guess
that
they
did
have
come
that
from.
with They have that with what is it? The Harlem Renaissance. You know, so
Yeah,
they'll touch on that. They'll
yeah,
touch on a little bit of the blues and the grassroots.
definitely.
But it seems like once we get to, you know, the origins of hip hop, we stop and we feel like that history doesn't need to be taught to our kids.
I think what it is that even now, I just did a panel a week or so ago. It's the fact that the violent part of hip hop is
Mm.
being glorified, and I do say there is a difference between hip hop and rap, and I
Yeah.
did say that on the panel. To me personally, rap is more of kind of the violent side. Hip hop is more of the b boys, the b girls, the feeling good, the artsy part of it, the more positive side, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there is a big difference between hip hop and rap. Do I feel like it should be in our textbooks and taught in school? Definitely.
Yeah.
Why not? There's a lot of people in hip hop that have done a lot of great things that, again, in our culture, we just don't get the credit for, and it's time.
Right. It is time, and I think it's also time for our young people to know this. I think we almost leave it to, well, it's just music, so it's not going to change anything, and this is true. It's not going to change legislation or things of that nature. But I believe that it does inspire our young people to show up a certain way in their community.
I'm gonna say I disagree. I do
Okay.
feel that it could change legislation because you got Beyonce and Jay Z up in the White House. You know what I mean? And to me, if these artists
Or
didn't
Kanye.
that's different. But again, if these artists didn't have the self-expression,
Yeah.
Barack wouldn't be inviting them to the White House. So hip hop is doing something here, and I do feel like it's very influential, and it can adjust and change politics.
What artists to do? Well, first, before I even ask you this question, explain what Hip Stepper is and the philosophy your father had when he created that.
Okay, so Hip Step Massive is our official name. Hip Step Massive is an eco-responsible global movement of the hip hop, jungle, drum and bass, breakbeat, EDM, and soultronica culture. When my dad first started this, first things first, I sound like him. First
You
things
sure
first,
do.
he did want to start something for his children. That was his mind was always as an entrepreneur. He always thought, okay, I gotta leave my kids something, and that's first, what he did.
Right.
But he also wanted something for the people. He did understand hip hop as a whole, but he was like, hey, here, I see where hip hop is going. I wanna mesh it with something else, and that's where he meshed the hip hop with the drum and bass.
Wow, that's and right now you're keeping it going.
Definitely.
Would you say that there's somebody in the mainstream that your father would be like, yeah, that's Hip Stepper right there?
My dad, he liked a lot of people, but I can't truly say, I can't give anybody in the industry credit and say that
No. Not a Kendrick, not a J. Cole. I feel like J. Cole would be close.
J. Cole would be close.
Yeah.
And I would say Kendrick would be close.
Okay.
So you got me there. Them two, yeah, close.
Right. Right.
Speaking about freedom and equality
Sure.
and justice, yeah. So
Yeah.
they'd be close. But we're a little bit more wild. We're jungle children, so we're a little bit more wild than them.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Your father was very, and should I say is, because you're carrying on that energy, right? Your father was he was a true activist for this culture, which is the reason why I wanted to really highlight him. And for those who might not be aware, one of the founders of hip hop, African Bambaataa, has been alleged to have molested several young boys for years, amongst other disgusting things that I've read and heard about. And the question I had in my mind, because following your father for so long, Bambaataa was the father. He was his father.
Yeah.
And then these allegations come out, how difficult was that for him to look at that and kind of accept it as a reality?
Well, that's like any parent that, pretty much disappoints a child when a child finds. That's like you saying you're coming to pick me up and you just don't, and the child's waiting at the window, waiting for the parent to pick him up, But I do understand that this circumstance was a lot tougher. He was very heartbroken, to hear about these allegations, and especially from the victims, which I do stand by. And I can openly and honestly say that, any type of abuse it's heartbreaking and it's wrong.
Right.
But again, my father was very heartbroken. He stood by the victims and he spoke his truth. So you can actually look that up on YouTube. There's a lot of articles where my father, he spoke his piece.
Yeah.
That was one thing about him. He didn't hide anything. He spoke his piece. If he felt a way about something, he was very blunt. I get that from him, but he definitely spoke on it. You know,
Yeah.
he was very heartbroken about it.
He had no problem speaking on it,
Not at all.
which kind of concerned me. Did it concern you when he was speaking
Definitely.
so vocal about it?
Definitely. My father stepped down from the Zulu Nation, from that board, and that was the first thing where people were like, whoa, like, that's a big step, because his heart was in the nation. He loved it. He loved the people. And he still, even to, his last breath, I'm more than positive that he did. And I still love all of my Zulu family. We can't blame the group as a whole. People do things personally, and you gotta blame that person for, it's all about self-accountability.
Yeah.
And that's what I stand by, self-accountability, and with the allegations, that's on that person. But we can't blame the whole nation because everyone's not like that.
So your father was murdered in June
Correct.
2017 in Atlanta, and would it surprise you if you learned that the Zulu Nation had something to do with that?
It'd be heartbreaking, but again, I don't want to say, okay, it's the Zulu Nation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a group, there are members, and again, I say it's about self-accountability. Everybody is accountable for their own personal actions, but would I be upset and heartbroken? Of course. Like, my dad was my heart, my world, so, yeah.
Do you think, and I know, as far as the whole history of hip hop, we always have to mention Bambaataa.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think in some way that tarnishes when we teach this history to our young people? Is that something that you kind of go over? I know with R. Kelly, people don't want to play his music. With Michael Jackson, he's being banned on certain radio stations. What do you think this does when it comes to when we really talk about the birth of hip hop?
Well, I do give credit where credit's due. Talent is talent. Wrongdoings are wrongdoings. I don't, in some way, I can't say I'm like riding the fence. In all honesty, it's still something that I'm personally dealing with. Because again, this is my dad. And I have been around a lot of the Zulu Nation members, the anniversaries, which were fun. And that's
I
where,
went to one. It was amazing.
And that's where I've got a lot of, my knowledge from. And being around these people and learning and just piggybacking, shadowing them. And do I feel like it's tarnished hip hop from these things? In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
Because just unfortunately the way humans' minds work, again, we don't pinpoint it on one person.
Right.
We always say it's the group.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately.
it looks bad.
It does.
It's bad and it looks bad. And it does make our hip hop culture look bad when allegations like this come out. So.
And how much do you still attend the hip hop anniversaries?
Those are no
or the
more.
Zulu Nation?
No.
They're no
Those are no
more. When did they stop?
Pretty much after my dad.
Really?
I mean, they still do. You have different chapters that do have, their anniversaries. Like, I was out in Seattle, and they had one. I didn't attend it. I wanted to, but shouts out to the Seattle chapter. They are amazing people. They showed me so much love down there. But there are different chapters that are still holding their own, that have separated themselves. Because, again, they do a lot of good.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's tough where you don't want to blame the entire group. It's not the whole nation. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of them are doing a lot of good in the community, and they still are.
And let's talk about that good, because I know that's the legacy you're keeping going. You're keeping that same energy for your father. And he was such a, and another thing I loved about him, no matter where he went, he still rep New Haven.
Oh, yeah.
Which was great. You can't say that about everybody.
No, unfortunately not.
But let's talk about that good that you're doing, because what I think happens is when we talk about hip hop, of course we narrow it down to just the mainstream artists. But I really do believe that the essence of what Zulu Nation was, and what your father was doing is starting to show up in a lot of these artists and the things that they do even off stage, but in the community on a grassroots level is where we see a lot of change.
Correct.
So what are some things that you know that you're doing, that you're carrying that legacy in the community with hip hop?
First things first, I have to mention this, in June, we are doing our first, without my father being here, we are doing our first TC Islam Hip Step anniversary. So this is a big deal. Performances it's a surprise, but we're very excited about it. We actually are in Uganda. My dad left a lot of projects unfinished, unfortunately, but building homes out of recyclable materials.
Really?
And they're actually having a hip step cipher down there coming up on the 30th of this month.
Wow.
So they're actually teaching the b-boy, the b-girl, the fundamentals of hip hop, and it's exciting, especially when, and I just have to say this, when you see children who pretty much have nothing. You know what I mean? Like no shoes, hardly any clothes, and you see them just having a good time because someone hooked up a speaker and is playing music. It makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
And just we complain about a lot of things on this side, and I say, oh, we're so spoiled, and people act like we're so deprived over here, but we're not. And when you look at another country who has less than you, but their hearts are so big, it makes us feel really good. And especially in hip step, you know what I'm saying? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring love and light to all corners of the earth. We also have our hip step line coming out, our merch.
Yeah, talk about
Hip Step
that.
Massive merch. I'm very excited. This is one of the first pieces from it, especially the hat coming out this spring. I do have a song called Great Change coming out next week, dedicated to my dad, so I'm excited about that too, excited to start performing. But we have a lot of projects coming out. There's MCs, DJs, B-boys, B-girls, producers, just if you do anything creative, we want you and we like you. Also go to www.hipstepmassive.ning.com. Join, you'll be accepted. We wanna create more community. At this point, again, like you said, it's about community, it's about grassroots, and it's about us coming together because we need each other.
Yeah.
All in all, we definitely need each other.
Does the Zulu Nation, at this point, well, are you separating your movement and what you do from Zulu Nation? So Zulu Nation does what they do, Hip Stepper, does what they do, or
at this point, yes. We were Hip Step Zulus, but my father did separate that and said, we are our own entity. So we're just Hip Step Massive. But we still love Zulu Nation. I love all my family.
and will they come together at this anniversary?
A lot of them are in hip step. A
In
lot
hip
of
step.
them are hip steppers. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, they'll all be there. They're all family. Like I said, and it's all love.
Yeah.
It's all love.
Are you in the schools? Are you doing anything education wise with when it comes to hip hop culture?
As far as our upcoming projects, we do plan to do a lot of giveaways, a lot of speakers coming into the schools, and we do want to do, just more in our community. We're grouping together. I can't tell everything yet, but we are
that's
grouping
fine.
together, and we are talking about doing a lot more hands-on type of projects and not just online.
Yeah. How much responsibility do you think these artists need to have? I mean, your father, he took that responsibility personally.
Definitely.
Nobody had to teach him or tell him, hey, think about what you're saying, think about the example you're showing. And I know a lot of people would disagree with me on the influence of hip hop, or even comparing it to civil rights. And I only say that just because of the amount of people that these artists can influence. However, we do have the conflict of content, and we see images exploited and certain narratives exploited. Do you feel that that's changing?
I don't.
You don't?
No.
No?
I don't. Like I said, it's just, I'm always like 50-50 with
Yeah.
stuff because even my dad taught me it's about facts. You know what I'm saying? And I do understand, the background a lot in the industry. It is smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
And what's being pushed to the forefront is what can make certain people money.
Right.
So this is where I say, a lot of the violent parts of the music industry are being pushed up there because it sells.
Yeah.
What I would like to see is a lot of the positive side being pushed to the forefront.
Some type of balance.
I'm not saying life is all peaches and cream.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because you have to see the realness in life in order to make that great change.
Very true.
But I wish it was like 50-50. Like, okay, let's understand and understand what's really going on, and here's the positive side of like how to fix it. But a lot of the content now, it's about guns and pills and how many women you sleep with, and I mean, you can
Because back in I'm about to say because back in the day
you can go back and say that has been in hip hop for a while.
Yeah.
But you still had the Queen Latifahs, you still had you know what I mean? You still had the other side of the spectrum where it was like, okay, yeah, that's going on, but there's a positive side to kind of balance that out.
Yeah. I mean, and you had images that were shown more too. Collared sweatshirts were like the top thing to wear,
Yeah.
and the number one song during the time of a police brutality situation was "Fight the Power."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
One of my faves.
Yeah, definitely. Did you listen to Offset's album?
I did not.
All right.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't want to.
Okay. Well, you should. You should. And this is the reason why I brought this topic in, because I'm going more towards the idea of us owning our own media.
Correct.
And me being a hip hop head, it's important for us to understand that we need to take back a culture that I believe was definitely infiltrated.
Agreed.
And the voice was silenced or limited. But with people like Jay-Z kind of waking up to the idea that now I need to own my masters. I need to own the streaming service. I'm wondering if and then seeing Offset, if you listen to Offset's album, a lot of growth of what he's talking. It's not perfect. It's not, talking about, it's not gospel, right?
Of course.
But at the same time, he's really, really speaking some things that we can take and talk with the youth about.
Okay.
So you might want to just take a,
Okay. I will. I'll take that.
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah, because I believe we are growing, to that point. What other things do you think we need to do when it comes to hip hop culture, to kind of take back the culture and start making it the voice that speaks that diversity, that speaks that balance for young people?
I think everything starts with your mental. So I think training the mind to be more positive. And again, like I said, I do understand that life is not peaches and cream, but more knowledge, gaining more knowledge. Because even how you're saying he, is spitting a little bit of knowledge up there, but then you look at his other half, is she doing that? You know what I'm saying? Are they evenly yoked?
Oh, you mean Cardi B?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are they evenly yoked right there? You know what I'm saying? Because honestly, I just saw her backside crack on her video.
Right.
So that comes with, okay, we're calling her queen, but truly, what is the true representation of a queen?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it does start with the mentality. And I understand people are on labels and they do certain things that they have to do because they're with these labels. But again, you look at Prince, he fought for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? He was, as far as I know, one of the first to even be able to sell his stuff online, and he was telling us, like, look, these labels they're slaving you, enslaving you. You know what I'm saying? So I do agree with, the whole point of taking it back. It is ours. And again, I love Prince, and I agreed with his whole mentality of this is our talent. This is yours. What you were blessed with is your gift, and nobody should tell you what to do with it in all actuality. But again, I think it starts with the mentality of, our queens and our kings, and not just being the N-word.
Yeah, and I think we need to probably get into these schools more.
Correct.
Because if we're talking a lot of times, because I know from even your father's day, I know the older folk back then, civil rights was not messing with the hip hop generation.
True.
They were burning the CDs.
True.
And so, don't you feel like we're probably just in the same time where the older generation is looking at it like, no, this is not how we used to do it, but yet we were saying something back then. Do you feel like that's where this is right now?
I do feel like the older generation, some of them do get stuck in a certain mentality. Because it's about growth. Because even myself, I'm not that much older, but I do say I need to know what the younger generation is talking about and what they're doing and what's popular with them and which way they're going in order to teach and to grow. And I don't want to bash my legends and my older generation, but I sit down with a lot of them and they're just like, this is how it has to go, and, this is it, and that's fine.
A lot of my dudes are bitter.
Everything,
right?
Because a lot of the older ways do work, but we do have to be open to great change.
Yeah.
Again, it's about all of our mentals coming together, all of our minds coming together. You know what I mean? And that's how new things are created. That's how you create a new microphone, or there's a glitch here. Someone came up with that idea. You have to be open to a little bit of change, and I do feel like some of our older generation is just, they're kind of stuck in their ways.
Oh yeah. Well, a lot of dudes my age are bitter. Okay, they want to hear boom bap rap and that's it.
Yeah, you can't.
Spencer, I mean, you're young, right? So
you're young.
You're like what, 22, 23? 21.
Yeah, you're young.
So would you say hip hop is influential as it was even when I was younger?
Yes, but not so in a great way sometimes. I feel like she said before, the content that's being pushed out is drugs, violence, and all this other stuff because that's what sells in this typical day and age.
Yeah.
But I do feel like, I actually took a recent look at 21 Savage's videos and his songs and how he speaks about financial literacy. He's trying to teach people how to be financial literate, and I feel like that's huge, especially because that's not typically taught to us in our music. And also Meek Mill, who's battling his cases,
Criminal justice reform.
The growth in his music was extreme to me because I grew up listening to Meek Mill, and Meek Mill 5 years ago is not Meek Mill today. You see the steps that he took to just make the progression, just maturing his music is extremely motivational to me.
Do you see that because Meek Mills is not the Meek Mills from 5 years ago,
Yeah.
right? But is it? Do you think it's just as accepted, and do you think young people are actually taking something from it more than they did 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit more vocal, where a lot of us are cracking down on these prison systems and how, like, they're just, they try to trap us, I would say, like, how he shouldn't be in jail for violating probation stemming from 10 years ago when there's people out in yeah.
So you feel like this is bringing more awareness to you all?
Yeah, absolutely.
What about, aside from like criminal justice reform, what other topics do you feel like are socially driven, socially conscious topics that you feel like are being spoken about in hip hop and now talking about it more with young people?
Really just police brutality, because that's the main thing that's been going on, especially in the past couple of years.
Mental health, I would say.
Mental health. I think we're taking a more concerned about that because that's typically not taught, especially in the Black community.
And what about, like, as far as when XXX died and when Lil Peep committed suicide? Like, do you think these? I know for us, when there was the East and West Coast beef, there was such an influence on everybody. We all reacted to that, right? Do you feel like your generation is reacting to a lot of things that happen in hip hop now, or is it kind of like we're just listening to the music?
I think we are. Well, some of us are, depending on what artists you listen to.
Yeah.
I mean, XXX is kind of like a tricky situation because of his not allegations, but what his
He was
bad
accused
stuff that
of,
he
yeah.
accused of. So the validity of what he speaks a lot contradicts his actions and stuff like that. But I know he did try to speak a positive message towards the end of his life, and a lot of people took from that.
Yeah. I mean, and Tupac was the same way anyway.
Yeah, you could say that. Definitely.
When it comes to that.
Malcolm X too, if you want to, bring it there. But
You mean Malcolm X before he became Malcolm?
Yeah.
Anyway, just to clear
that up.
So what artists, Imani, do you feel should be in the history books? What part of hip hop do you feel like we need to be teaching this part of hip hop culture to our young people?
I do feel like the 90s is always like skipped over.
Yeah.
Just all the artists in the 90s, and that's just me because people call me an 80s baby. I was 89. I'm aging myself, but I pretty much listened to stuff in the 90s. I always feel like people go right to the 80s. We skipped over the 90s. I feel like there was a lot of growth in the 90s with all of the 90s, hip hop artists and just music in general. But I listen to everything. I don't have a favorite anything. I know I'm a weirdo. I don't even have a favorite color. But I do listen. I listen to everything and everyone, unless, like I said, I want to stay away from certain things. But I feel like just 90s hip hop was like really skipped over.
Yeah, and I mean 80s and 90s, they don't talk about any of it, when it comes to these history books.
Of course.
And hip hop sociology, if you want to call it that, or something that I was teaching in high school.
Yes.
It was more influential. Teaching that had more of an effect on young people than teaching about somebody like a Martin Luther King. No disrespect, of course,
no disrespect
to Dr. King. However, Spencer, would you say that who would you say students would be, young people would be more influenced by hearing the story of Martin again, or hearing the story of Tupac?
Tupac.
I'd say Tupac too.
You know?
I can relate to him more.
Tupac.
I feel like,
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think these artists need to be pushed out more into the history books.
I agree.
What role do you think TC? What role do you think your father would play today?
I think my dad was more between a Martin and a Malcolm, only because everybody knows, and shouts out to my hip steppers, he wasn't afraid to bring it to you.
Yeah.
You know, we
No,
always
he
say
wasn't.
he was a mirror of what you were. You know, and a lot of people say, okay, well, don't fight violence with violence, but at the same time, there comes a point where you gotta go to war. You even look at biblical terms; they went to war. You know what I'm saying? You gotta be able to stand up for what you really believe in, and he wasn't afraid to do that. So I would say he was more of a Malcolm X because of that fire, you know,
Yeah.
because of that energy in him and the bluntness.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think if he was alive today? Do you think he would be out there in the mainstream, rubbing shoulders with some of these artists that are out there trying to influence them as well? Or do you think he would kind of be like, look, y'all got the mainstream, I'm focusing on my community?
Both, because he was in contact with a lot of mainstream artists, he just never put it out there. I would hear like phone calls and different things, and they
Like
would call him.
what artists?
They would call him to get. I don't want to put anyone out there.
Oh, okay,
But they
okay,
would
okay.
call him to get information on like certain things to do or certain situations, and he was a father figure to a lot of people, even just grown men. He was a father figure, like, yeah, man, you got to stand up for this, or you know, lay low, or I got you. Let me make a phone call. But I did catch him one time listening to a Jay-Z album, like the Blueprint. That was one of
Okay,
his
Blueprint
favorites.
One, Blueprint
One.
One,
Yeah.
classic.
And he was like, yeah, this is, yeah, exactly his voice. He was like, this is a classic, man. Yeah, Jay-Z did his thing on this, like, you know how he was talking.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, Dad. All right, you know.
Where can people catch more of TC and his content and his music? You know, let them know where they can go, because I know there's probably a lot of people who aren't even aware of the legend that he is.
There's a lot. There's a lot of YouTube videos for one. There's a Hip Step Massive documentary. It's a bit old, but we will be doing another one with a lot of the new members. Also, like I said, go to hipstepmassive.ning.com. We're actually redoing the site and putting a lot more content out there about him. But you definitely can Google TC Islam, ISLAM or IZLAM, or you can Google the Funky Alien and he'll pop right
The
up.
Funky Alien. Yes. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to continue the movement of really pushing hip hop to our young people, you know,
Agreed.
because the last thing that it's almost the same, and I liken it to the idea of a lot of young people thinking as if their history started from slave chains. And then they realize, oh, there's a history before slave chains that
I
they
used to
don't
get
put,
frustrated.
you know, that they don't put in the books.
I was militant in school. Let me just say this. I was very militant. I always got put out of class because my social studies teacher would be like, can I teach today or do you have to go to the office? I'd be like, well, let me just say one thing before I go to the office.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I don't want to sit here and I feel like what you're teaching me is not the truth. Who wrote this book, first of all?
And see that, and that's the reason why I feel like we need to really, if we're not going to put it in the history books, we need to teach our young people the history before slave chains and the history after the civil rights era.
Because we weren't just slaves, and it's frustrating to see that. And I get that, you know, it's a reality. It is a part of history.
Sure.
But at the same time, we did do a lot of magnificent, wonderful things, and we created a lot of things that should be today. We created the toilet, we created the car,
Right.
we created a bunch of things that we just didn't get credit for.
Right.
You know, and that's why I feel like even now, entrepreneurship and getting your business correct is very important. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the things that we did create, we didn't copyright, we didn't trademark because we didn't know those things. And that's why I say knowledge is important. Once you have that knowledge, you can do anything.
And how influential is it for young people to learn that, wait a minute, so there was a generation of young people who had to see leaders be assassinated and then created something called hip hop out of nothing?
It's
Very
influential.
Oh, it's crazy
Very
influential.
But I definitely agree it does need to be in our history book.
Yeah, we got to push them in there. So, hip steppers, let's get to it. All right.
Okay, separate, let's go. We ready. We always ready.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
All
you
right.
for having me.
Definitely come back. All right. And RIP to TC Islam. All right. This is Moving Target. Make sure you check out Yusef on the electric drum. Good morning.